In the beginning, before there was anything, before there was anywhere, before there was any when, there was God, who is everywhere and every when. He is isness itself, and he has everything, so he doesn't even need to create the world. But God still created the world. Wait, no, it didn't look like that at first. It was more formless and void and very dark. But God let there be light, so now there's light. And this light stuff is pretty good, so God separated it from the darkness. And we should give these things names. Good news, the water below is now separated from the water above. Even more good news, now there's dry land. And guess what? Now there's life. Just plants for now. But the plants might have cleaned up the air, so now you can see the sun, moon, and stars. That's going to be very useful. There's animals in the water. There's animals in the air. There's animals on the land. And now it's time for God's coolest creation so far. God made a human person, called Adam, and gave him an awesome garden, but he was still lonely, so God gave him a wife. These two kinds of humans are made out of the same stuff, but also different so they can have a relationship. God gave them a lot of trees, but two big important ones. They're allowed to eat from this one, because if they do, they're going to live forever. But God told them not to eat from this one, because if they do, they die. Seems like a pretty obvious choice, right? Actually, said some snake who's actually the devil, God doesn't want you to eat from this tree because you're going to become like him, and he doesn't want you to get too powerful. Okay, said Eve. Okay, said Adam. So they ate from the tree, and just like that, humanity had failed God's requirements for them. They lost access to the tree of life, which means they're going to end up dying. Humanity had sided with Satan over God, losing all rights to the life that God gave them. So nobody could blame God if he ended humanity right then and there. But God didn't do that. God promised one day Satan would be destroyed by one of their kids. But Adam and Eve already sinned, so let's see if their kids can do any better. Cain is mad at his brother Abel because Abel's better at having faith in God. God tells Cain he needs to resist sin, and Cain kills his brother. Why'd he do that? Well, you see, the problem of Adam's sin was passed down to Cain because the problem affects all of humanity. So as humans multiply, sin and evil multiply. Enough of this. God chooses the least evil guy, a guy named Noah. He's still a sinner, but he has faith in God, so he's a relatively decent guy compared to everyone else. God tells him to build a boat for him and his family, and everyone laughs at them until God makes a huge flood that kills everyone except them. But once the flood passes, God makes the rainbow the sign of his covenant. Remember that promise that Satan's going to be destroyed? God adds to it, saying he's not going to destroy the world again until then, because now people are going to have some basic decency. God's not fixing the world yet, but he's making it a stable enough place so that he can do that in the future. So now people are not quite as evil as they were before. They're good enough that they can work together in society, but evil enough that they're going to use that to build a huge tower up to God out of their own pride. And evil people are dangerous when they're given too much power, so God makes the whole tower thing fail by dividing everyone's language. So maintenant, le monde ne peut pas travailler ensemble. So now people are divided into different nations, and these nations each have their own gods. But wouldn't it be cool if there was one nation specifically devoted to the one true God? So God chose Abraham to be the father of his people, and God updated the covenant saying that God's going to make a nation that he's going to use to fix the world. God promised Abraham he's going to have as many kids as the stars in the sky. And Abraham was like, how's that going to be possible? My wife is super old. But Abraham still had faith in God's covenant. So does that mean he's the chosen one who's going to defeat Satan? Well, sadly no, because Abraham still sinned by telling the king that his wife was really his sister. But they do have kids. This one struggled with God, so he got the name Israel, which means struggled with God. And his children are going to become the 12 tribes of Israel. He struggled with God because sin is still a problem. If you think your family is bad, this one was so dysfunctional that they sent Joseph to slavery in Egypt. But while he was there, God gave him the ability to protect Egypt from starving to death. So now Egypt loves Joseph, and in a great act of forgiveness, Joseph invited the rest of his family back to live with him in Egypt. So God was glorified through his people by turning a bad thing into a good thing. At first, Egypt likes the Israelites, but when they multiply a lot, Egypt stops liking them and enslaves them instead. Moses is one of the Israelites, and when he sees an Egyptian beating another Israelite, he kills the Egyptian. Come on, Israelites, let's rise up. Bro, you're gonna get us in trouble. So Moses has to flee Egypt, and he moves to the middle of nowhere, joins a sheep farm, gets married, and lives happily ever after. But one day, God appears to Moses in a burning bush, saying it's finally time for the Israelites to have that land God promised them. So God tells Moses to tell the leader of Egypt to let his people go. So Moses goes back to Egypt and tells Pharaoh, let my people go. No. But God gives Moses the ability to cause plagues in Egypt. Let my people go, or the river turns to blood. No. Or you get frogs everywhere. No. Gnats. No. Flies. No. Dead livestock. No. Boils. No. Hail. No. Locusts. No. Darkness. No. Let us go, or your firstborn sons will die. No. But then the firstborn sons die, so the Pharaoh's like, okay, fine, you can leave. So the Israelites set out for the promised land, but when they're about halfway there, Egypt changes its mind and sends the army after them to bring them back. They corner them by the Red Sea. We've got you surrounded. Oh yeah, says Moses, watch this. So the waters of the Red Sea part, the Israelites escape, but when the Egyptians try to follow them, they unpart and they all die. On their journey, they take a rest stop at Mount Sinai so God can give them the law for when they live in the Promised Land. Moses will go up to the top of the mountain to receive the law, so he says, "Don't worship any false gods while I'm gone." Bro, I'm bored, let's worship some false gods. So they make a golden calf and worship it. Meanwhile, on the top of the mountain, the presence of God descends upon the mountain, and Moses receives the law on stone tablets, including the 10 Commandments. But when Moses goes back down and sees the Israelites worshipping a false god, he gets so mad he smashes the stone tablets. So he goes back up the mountain and gets new stone tablets. And God adds to the covenant, saying he's going to give the people the law and the land if they're faithful to the covenant. So let's see how faithful they're going to be. The people are approaching the Promised Land, but the evil Canaanites already live there. They have strong fortresses and big, scary soldiers, and the Israelites are going to have to fight them to take over the land. Come on, guys, be brave. God's going to be with you? No, we're too afraid. So the Israelites turn away, they don't invade the land, which means they did not have faith in God's covenant, so their punishment is they have to wander around the Sinai desert for 40 years. But what about Moses? He didn't do anything wrong, so maybe he's the chosen one who's going to defeat Satan? Well, no, Moses still sinned by doing a miracle the wrong way, so his punishment is he's going to die before he gets to enter the Promised Land. But then the next generation of Israelites, led by Joshua, does enter the land, uses trumpets to smash the city of Jericho, and drives out the rest of the Canaanites. Cool, now we finally have our land, but who's gonna rule us? So God appoints judges to rule over the people and defend them from the enemy nations. Because during this time, there's a pattern that goes something like this. There's peace in the land, but then people get lazy and forget about God, so God lets their enemies conquer them, but then people turn back to God, so God strengthens them to reconquer their land and there's peace in the land again. This pattern repeats many, many times with many, many different judges, and people are starting to get sick of it. Bro, why can't we just have a king? Trust me, you don't want a king, says Samuel. Come on, everyone else has a king. Okay, fine, says Samuel, but the king's gonna be oppressive. So Samuel anoints Saul as king, and sure enough, Saul is an oppressive ruler. You know who would be a better ruler? This young kid, David. He's just a shepherd and a string player, so no one takes him seriously. But one day, a huge, scary caveman warrior, Goliath, shows up to fight the Israelites. Okay, guys, who wants to fight Goliath? I'll do it, says David. So David takes out his slingshot, hits Goliath in the head with a rock, and kills him. So now David's a hero, and everyone loves David, and Saul is getting pretty jealous of David. Especially because all the girls are chanting, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. So Saul wants to kill David. So David flees, and Saul pursues him. But one day David gets a golden opportunity to kill Saul while he's using the bathroom, but he doesn't, so Saul forgives David. But one day Saul dies to avoid being captured, so David becomes the next king. This is awesome. It starts out really well, and David gains a lot of victories for his kingdom. Maybe he's the chosen one that's going to defeat Satan. Except no. David sins because he likes this one woman, so he has her husband killed in battle so he can steal her. So God makes everything go downhill for David after that. But God still promises that one of David's descendants will be the king that he couldn't be, have a kingdom that covers the entire world and lasts forever. So let's add this to the covenant.